Thank you for watching, liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing right now. Got a question here asked on LockerGnome.net. What if Apple never existed? And I think Let me answer the question! My dog, Wicket, he's, again, more of a Linux kind of dog. And that's fine, you can like Linux! In fact, if Apple never existed, Linux would probably have a better shot at, being everywhere. Actually, I can't really back that up, because I don't think Linux would get much further than it is at this point, even if Apple never existed. I mean, it's an alternative! That's fine! For some, it's the primary choice. Not for everybody! If Apple never existed, I would say the world would be a very, very sad place. And just think about that. At this point in time, when you're thinking of a smartphone, for most people, it's the iPhone and everything else. When you're thinking about a tablet computer, it's the iPad and everything else. When you're thinking about an MP3 player, it's an iPod and everything else. Apple. Strong brand, right? But if Apple wasn't around, make no mistake, I would hope that another company would have established itself. Some other platform, potentially. We may, have still been, at this point in time, in the dark ages. That would be the world before something like Mac OS X was around. And I'm not saying that Linux, again, and not to argue with my dog, I do that frequently enough, and I don't need any more proof of that. I don't think that Linux would have accelerated anymore because Apple existed. In fact, I would say Linux would actually have been hurt if Apple didn't exist. I would argue that Microsoft would have been hurt if Apple didn't exist. So I think the world would be a much more pathetic place for consumer electronics if Apple didn't exist. But I would say the same thing if you were to ask me the question, what if Microsoft never existed? Or what if Linux never existed? What if any one of these technologies that we have in our life never existed? Because ultimately, one company and its products and its brand has the opportunity to inspire others, to raise the bar, to create experiences that can be shared. And Apple has done an amazing job. But, and you can do your history, I've said it, I've been saying it for years, I respect Microsoft for what they did with the ecosystem, to use a Microsoft phrase. That's, if you ever sit in on a meeting at Microsoft, they throw that word around with reckless abandon. Before you knew, if you could buy the software, you had to make sure that the computer that you had could run it. Well, when something was DOS compatible or Windows compatible, you knew, right? Oh, okay. Well, I've got a computer that runs DOS, or I've got a computer that runs Windows. I know I can run this software. These days, it's not as big of a deal because you know that PC is pretty much synonymous with Microsoft Windows. Mac, of course, Mac OS X, don't really see any Linux software, at least on store shelves. Bottom line, the way things were fragmented, incredibly fragmented. And Microsoft, despite their tactics, monopolistic practices, as some would argue, I think they did a good thing by uniting and making it easier for someone, a consumer, to walk into a store or, order from a catalog. At that point in time, people did still order from catalogs, and know that what they were getting would be compatible with what they already had. This was a huge deal. Way back when. You got half the audience was probably too young to remember a world before Windows, but I certainly do. I at one point in time, I couldn't have imagined a world without some kind of Commodore product, whether it would be a C64, a VIC-20, a Commodore 128, or beyond, the Amiga, which just didn't happen, didn't really go anywhere, which is kind of sad. Either way, I think that the world would be far worse off without either Microsoft or Apple. So I'm changing the question a bit because I don't want to. I'm not trying to say that I'm more on the side of Apple or more on the side of company that isn't Apple. I think we have to look at every particular effort that's made in this marketplace of ideas and products and services as something which pushes us all forward. And I think that without Apple, as originally asked, I think we'd be a lot further behind. And certainly without Microsoft, we'd really, really be further behind. To the point where Apple may have taken off further if Microsoft didn't exist, but that would not have necessarily made the world a better place. We are a better place because we have the opportunity to compete and to continuously raise the bar, igniting this spirit and enthusiasm, innovation, a very appropriate word to use. Think about what happens when there is no competition. Internet Explorer 6. I rest my case.